late 30s, early 40s by that point, 2015 to 2017, when things clearly start going wrong, both for me and for my family.
Samir, how did you find carnivore?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Dave. One that I'm not exactly sure of myself, to be completely honest. So I think the story starts. Well, no, let's start the story before that. So the story starts way when I was a teenager, and I was interested in health, and I became sort of vegan vegetarian, in part for health reasons, but mostly for political reasons. So I'm talking when I was 18, 19, living in Canada at that time. So, I had an interest in health going back that far, and I had a bias. Now I understand it to be a bias that being sort of vegan was the healthiest way to live. And for a little while, I think my experience was positive. For the first couple of years, going from eating, you can imagine a university junk food diet to a vegan diet. It was a huge improvement for the first couple of years. By the end of that, though, by the end of my university, I was the most gaseous person you could possibly imagine. I was one big walking fart, pretty much. Okay. And I couldn't understand what the hell was going wrong. I knew that I was eating some junk food. In Montreal, Montreal's a city known for its poutine. Even a vegetarian version of poutine is not, or maybe especially a vegetarian version of poutine is not a particularly healthy food. We're talking French fries, gravy, cheese, etc. I was vegan, so I wasn't really eating the poutine, but whatever I was eating, it was really wrecking my stomach. So I would go on these pieces where these periods where I would say, okay, I got to stop eating the junk food, stop eating the French fries and so on, and just eat healthier and see what happens to my stomach. My stomach would actually get worse. Yeah. But of course, like a lot of vegans, I was ideologically committed to the diet. I wasn't going to leave it until I got a job in the quote unquote real world. And it was the kind of job where I was traveling around the world, and I just wasn't going to survive as a vegan. Like, it just was not going to work. So I downgraded myself to lacto-ovo vegetarian, again, thinking that plant-based is more healthy. And I stayed there throughout my career. So when did my career begin? My first job was around 2000, 2001, all the way until 2017. So it was in my late 30s, early 40s by that point, 2015 to 2017, when things clearly start going wrong, both for me and for my family. So our daughter was born in 2009. She had some issues from the beginning: nut allergies, eczema, asthma. These things don't sound like much, but the asthma, especially, like, she had a couple of asthma attacks that were pretty close to life-threatening. If we hadn't been able to get her medical attention, and she was only a year or two old, it could have been really bad, right? My wife also had, everyone was eating the same way I was, which is sort of largely plant-based. She had to go to hospital for what turned out to be kidney stones around 2013, 2014. So again, the question at the back of my head was, we are vegetarian. We are sort of whole food plant-based. We don't eat much dairy. We don't eat many eggs. We were taking dairy and eggs sometimes, but like, that wasn't really the focus of our diet. Why are we so sick? And we were on, at this period in time, also the number of medications we were taking was just going up and up and up. Every day, antihistamines, every day, something for digestion, something for GERD. My wife had developed thyroid issues, thyroid medication doses going up and up, Hashimoto's, etc. My own autoimmune diseases. I also have asthma. I also have vitiligo, getting worse, getting out of control. So I was like, okay, what the hell's going on? So what happened in 2017, a number of things happened. First of all, I sort of got laid off from my position at an international NGO. And I began a PhD here in South Africa. And I was, at that same time, one of my best friends had gotten a cancer diagnosis. And so instead of so I got admission to the PhD. I went down. I'm not in the same city where my PhD is registered. I'm here in Johannesburg. My PhD was in a university called Stellenbosch at that time. I've transferred since, but at that time it was in Stellenbosch University, which is in Cape Town, or near Cape Town. So I went to the library. I did not go to the library I was meant to go to. I got access to the medical library. This is before I figured out, actually, you can get all these papers online now pretty easily. But I went to the physical library. I told my family, look, I'm just going to spend a couple days here. Look through all the medical books. And Dave, I was just so pissed off. I mean, as you can probably tell at this point, like, if I'm entering a PhD, I'm someone who can do research. I'm pretty competent in that, pretty confident in my abilities to do research too. And I just started reading papers on my symptoms, on my wife's symptoms, on my daughter's symptoms. And it just really, really became clear to me that everything I had been told about plant-based being the right way to eat or the healthy way to eat was based on nothing. It was based on literally nothing. And in fact, all the cases of remission of most of these things that I saw going back 100 years or more in the literature were on what they called an animal-based diet originally, or an animal diet. I think they just called it the animal diet in the 19th century. So when I found that, and this is before, I wasn't really doing much YouTubing and stuff like that. But then once I found that, I got so angry. Then I went on the YouTube. I found people like Dr. Jason Funk, who prescribed fasting. I found people like Dr. Eric Berg, who was talking about the ketogenic diet and so on. And that led me to other areas of research, right? And my own health issues, some things like the vitiligo took a little bit longer to sort of go into remission. And now it's hardly visible. I have to sort of show people, here's the spot. Can't you see? Can't you see little spot there? But this whole area used to be white, right? So anyway, so that took a little bit longer. I think skin issues take a little bit longer. But in terms of just my overall health, my asthma, the weight loss, etc., that happened within weeks and months. And at that point, I wasn't even fully carnivore. I was more like keto, but I already had in my mind that actually eating a diet that was 70 or 80% meat is going to be the healthiest way for humans to eat. So I did a couple of sort of purely carnivorous experiments right around lockdown time, 2020. And I found that my health got even better. So that's where I am. I'm not 100% carnivore, for the record. Like I say, I sort of prescribed a hyper carnivore diet. So I'm talking about 70, 80% plus animal products. And for some people, we do find that actually you need to get rid of all the plant products in order to deal with food addictions and other things as well. And yeah, we've been doing it both with myself and with my clients. I got certified in health and nutrition coaching along the way. And it's been an awesome journey just to be able to help people with their own chronic illnesses. It's been amazing.
Wow. And I mean, congratulations on those results. And that must have been pretty cool doing this during lockdown, because you would have been like one of the only people that wasn't putting on weight during lockdown.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I think different people. So again, my perspective already by lockdown. I was finishing my health and nutrition coaching certification at that time as well. So it wasn't just myself. I was seeing not clients, but sort of case studies, the people who I needed to see in order to get my certification. And I saw that people had one of two responses. The more common response is the one that you're describing, where people were just overeating and stress eating. And yeah, it wasn't a good scene. But there were people, maybe there weren't a lot of us, but there were some of us who were like, all right, this is a chance to get our act together. What was my excuse for not being sort of 100% carnivore before? Well, I'm invited to these conferences and, I can't say no to everything. I'm in these social situations. Well, now there's no social situation. What's your excuse now? So that was sort of just, for me, it was sort of a curtain, like a veil between me and my target. Like once that sort of lifted and it's like, okay, I got no excuses. I better just do 100% carnivore and see how it goes, see how you feel. But yeah, I certainly saw the response that you're describing as well, where people just got stressed and overate and ended up gaining weight.
Yeah. I'm impressed to hear that the vitiligo has gone down. I had heard that Joe Rogan had a similar experience, but yeah, that it was on your arm only. Did you have anything else on your body?
So there is, yeah, I don't know if there's still spots on my elbows. There were spots here. There's nothing really there to see, maybe a little bit. So there's the elbows, mostly on my legs, which I won't show you now. But if you go to my YouTube channel, there are videos that I occasionally post updates of what my legs used to look like and what they look like today. Comparing with other people, like, I guess because, once you've had this, you notice when other people are struggling with it. And I see people at the gym, and I've talked with them who are really struggling, and it gets worse. So the thing about vitiligo that people don't understand is, if it was a fixed spot, if there's so I saw a lady, was at the school, and I met the mother of a friend, a mother of one of my daughter's friends, and I saw she had a white spot here. And if it was just a white spot there, you could sort of deal with it. You could sort of live with it. It's okay, I guess. Pain, but still. But the problem is the spots move. And when you wake up in the morning and you have spots where you didn't really remember them being, and there's always a little bit, that's just weird, really weird to deal with as if you're someone, I remember there was a time, this was on a holiday in Italy some years ago, and I was taking pictures of that same spot on my hand every day. And I was like, oh, look, today it looks like a clown face. Now it looks more like the Joker from the Batman. Now it looks like a Batman cowl. Like it was literally changing on a day by day basis. And that can be very, I mean, I'm making light of it because how do you live with these things? But it can be very unnerving. So to have control over that through your diet, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. It's such a big thing. Um, so like just if we step back for a second and just think about the timeline. So basically you started around 2020 and
I sort of started keto more like 2017, 2018, and carnivore more
uh-huh.
like 2020. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And over that period of time, um, you've lost weight, got more energy, that kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. Like, yeah, no, I mean, it's night and day stuff. So to give you one
Mhm.
example that I sometimes talk about, so the thing that bothered me again when I was putting on weight as a vegetarian, I would just get so annoyed at many, many things. One of the things that annoyed me the most was I would get, I mean, I now know I was getting hypoglycemic, but the way I experienced it was I was just getting really hungry after I exercised. So I've always been a swimmer. I was a pretty good competitive swimmer when I was a kid. So I do, a couple laps. I do like, like not even half the kind of workout that I used to do when I was a competitive swimmer, not even a quarter, like 20 minutes in the pool. And I would just be famished. I would just be so like, oh, shit, I got to get up and get out of the pool and find some food because I just can't handle it anymore. Right now, I mean, and then I had an experience in 2020, just before lockdown. So just when I was sort of moving in this direction, I was called up to London for a meeting. Overnight flight. Got there before, so this was like a conference. I was just going to spend a day there and basically take an evening flight back to South Africa. Got to the conference center before anyone else was there, at maybe 6:37 in the morning. What can I do now? Well, I have my swimming stuff. Let me go for a swim. By the way, that was a fasting day, so I hadn't eaten the whole day here in South Africa. Overnight flight, didn't eat on the flight. 7 o'clock in the morning at the hotel, taking out my swimming trunks. Swim for an hour. The conference is going to start at like I think 9. So I said, okay, I'll swim till 8. Get out of the pool at 8, not hungry at all. And that was huge. It was just a huge feeling to be able to know that you're actually burning your fat stores and succeeding. And then, of course, what did they have in the conference? They had biscuits and chocolates and cakes. So I didn't eat any of that stuff. I didn't eat until late that night, 7 or 8 that night. So I'd gone more than, at that point, it must have been about 60 hours without eating, and no issues, no complaints. Or maybe more like 48 hours without eating. But it was no problem for me to do that. So this night and day difference, I mean, it was just something that was incredible.
For for the uninitiated, that seems crazy. But yeah, it's just this is kind of the magic of eating nutrition, the food that gives your body nutrition. It's like you can go for a long period of time without actually eating anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't recommend long fasts as often as I used to, and I certainly don't do them as often as I used to, because I did feel like maybe I was overdoing it, and like maybe I was losing some. Maybe I was sort of at the cusp of having some vitamin deficiencies, maybe, but I was fasting a lot during that period. But now, if I have to go a couple days without eating, it's no big deal. It's easy. I just wouldn't recommend you do it like all the time.
Yeah. And so has your wife joined you on carnivore or is she keto?
No, I mean for her, it's been a slightly different journey. So I think with women in general, I think cycles just make it a little bit more challenging to stay very low carb all the time. So she's done her periods of sort of keto like stuff. She's definitely eating a lot more meat than she used to, and she's definitely healthier. But we're sort of more. I think what she's more practicing is just sort of generalized carb restriction. And that's for my teenage daughter as well. It's like you can still have the carbs, darling, but just try and within proportion here, because what we don't want to have happen is, and we see this with a lot of her teenage friends, they try to not to eat at all for a certain period of time, and then they end up binging on the carbs, and it's just not a good scene. So I try to get it in especially my teenage daughter's head, like whenever you open your mouth, it's got to be animal protein. You can have other things as well, but you have to have a good portion of animal protein first, and then the other things.
So you're eating currently twice a day, once a day?
Yeah, it depends on the day, but as a rule, yeah, twice a day is sort of my rule. So my first meal is around sort of what most people would consider lunchtime. So it's my breakfast, but it's at lunchtime, and it's what I call my sustainer meal. So It depends. If I have access to fatty beef, that's pretty much all I'm going to have. Maybe with some, if I don't have access to very fatty beef, then I'll have some butter with it, maybe some eggs. I also do have a little side portion of kimchi as well. I like the fermented. If I'm going to have vegetables, I like them to be detoxified, and kimchi is a good way to detoxify the vegetables. So that's my sustainer meal. And then, so why do I call it a sustainer meal? Because say something happens, I'm busy, and or say that I don't like the options at dinner time for whatever reason, I won't eat dinner. That's something that I do fairly often, is just skip the dinner, right? So that's an option. Or when I may have, when I'm cooking dinner for the family, or with the family sitting down to dinner together, if there's some non-beef meat, like chicken or fish or whatever, I'll have a little bit of that. And I might have a little bit more kimchi or something like that, or a little bit of low-carb vegetables, not really much. But really, my nutrition is coming from that first meal of the day, which is that beef, steak and eggs kind of a meal.
And how does this go down in South Africa with your friends or with work colleagues and stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting because over the years I've gotten less preachy about it. So I don't know if people notice it so much anymore. But in the beginning, they sure noticed it because I was telling people about it all the time. Listen, we have a very meat sort of oriented culture here. We have a culture of barbecuing and braaiing, we call it. But the vegan propaganda has been coming in, and now we do have plant-based, sections, with Beyond Meat, and I don't know what else. I try to avoid those parts of the grocery store, but they've come in. They weren't when I first moved here in 2017. They weren't here, or 2015. It wasn't here. Now it's here. So there is this perception that vegetables are important. Yeah, I mean, I just try and ignore. If it's someone in real life, I just kind of ignore them as a rule, and just sort of like, oh, okay, you like vegetables, nice, good for you. And meanwhile, I just go and help myself to another steak. Online, I'm a little bit more harsh. Why am I more harsh online? Because I feel those people who are spreading plant-based ideology are actually doing a disservice. And I feel like it's important that we tell people that there's no evidence behind your plant-based ideology. And in fact, some of us don't eat any plants and do very well, right? So, or eat hardly any plants and do very well. So I think there's I have a double standard in that if I'm just meeting someone on the streets, or like it's a friend or a friend's partner, not really going to try and get into a huge debate with them. I'm happy to share my story. I'm happy, and that's what I did with the lady who I met, who was suffering from vitiligo. I said, look, this is what I did to reverse my vitiligo. And she was like, yeah, that's never going to work for me. I said, it's up to you. I've planted the seed. I'll let you know. That if you ever get to the point where you're not happy with your condition, I planted the seed. I'll let you know how you can reverse it. The rest is up to you. I can't force anyone to do anything. I'm not going to sit you down and force feed you steak. That's not how we work, right? That's not how the world works. But I've given you the knowledge, and hopefully one day you will act on it.
Have you had anyone that you've spoken to about it, or has asked you about it, that has then gone on to do it?
So you have to remember, I'm a health coach. Yeah. So yes, lots. And with every cohort, so we have a cohort coming up in April. I've done a cohort just now for Ramadan, and it's funny because these are people some of whom have been getting my social media posts and been on my mailing list sometimes for years, but this plant-based ideology is so strong that we still have to convince. Like today, I'm trying to convince someone you can't just have 2 eggs for breakfast. It's not enough protein. It's not enough food. You got to get to 4, 5, 6 eggs. If you're going to stick to eggs, if you want to put some sausage in there or meat in there, maybe you can get by with less, right? But convincing this person like that, this person who intellectually completely agrees with me, they've been following all my social media posts, they've been on my email list, but just changing those habits, it's very difficult. So yeah, I'm convincing people every day. And again, that's very rewarding. But it's not just the people around me. The people around me too, in the sense that I think you just model good behavior. And like I say, when you are prioritizing protein, I think the people around you are more likely to prioritize protein as well. But some of my best friends, I was vegan for a long time and vegetarian for a long time. Some of my best friends are still vegetarian, and I'm not going to force anyone to do anything. So, but I think we've got it through to some of those folks that, and I think they themselves notice when they prioritize the vegetarian proteins. So if they take eggs and cheese and paneer and stuff like that, they tend to do better themselves. And I think they're noticing that. I think it's funny because as humans, we pick up on what we have a bias towards. Like when I first the couple that I'm talking about, maybe when we first started hanging out with them, they'd say, "Oh, I want to be healthy. I'm eating salad." Now they don't say that anymore because I think they themselves have noticed when they eat salad, they don't feel so good. So now they'll say, I want to be healthy. I'm having more paneer, for example, right, which is Indian cheese. So yeah, there's this. You notice what you pay attention to, and no one has until someone has told you that animal foods are actually the healthy foods. You don't notice how you feel after you eat those animal foods. But I think once that seed has gone into someone's head, now there's a little bit more room to actually question, oh, do I feel better when I'm having more animal foods? And I think most people, if they're being honest with themselves, will say the answer is yes.
Yeah. So, how do you work with people? You said you've got cohorts of people coming in, so you got groups of people coming in, and you're basically coaching like that.
Yeah, it depends. So there's a number of things. So we try and do the group coaching as much as we can. I like to work with groups. Why do I like to work with groups? Because I have a lot of experience, I have a lot of knowledge, but I'm not, a postmenopausal woman, right? But there might be postmenopausal women in the group, right, who can actually share their insights and who can actually. So sometimes me saying it's okay to have 5 eggs if you're a postmenopausal woman for breakfast, for example, they look at me with a sort of raised eyebrow, and in the back of their head, I know they're thinking, well, what the hell do you know? I mean, you're not a postmenopausal woman. But if one of their fellow coachees is saying, no, I did that and it was a big difference for me. I mean, that's where difference can really be made. Number one. Number two, I think it's just support in general. I mean, as you know, Dave, lifestyle change is not easy. And I think we can be in this community, in many other communities, we can be very harsh with each other or with ourselves. And I think just being giving people a little bit of grace, giving people a little bit of support to sort of say, look, I know you're trying your best. And that's actually the most important thing. If you're trying your best, no one's going to say anything to you, right? And if you're trying your best, what we're looking for is for you to get 2% better every day or 5% better every day or even 1% better every day. So if you had, I mean, and again, what that means is going to be contextual, right? So you and I have both done interviews with Bart K. I believe you've also done interviews with Bart, right? Whose position is there's no such thing as the essential carbohydrate or the recommended carbohydrate in the human diet is 0. Agreed, fine, no problem. However, if I'm talking with someone who has been having a mince pie every day, like those Christmassy treats or whatever, well, for that particular person, telling them that their intake of carbohydrate should be 0, not going to be helpful. So we ask them, okay, what can you do? Can you do half a mince pie? Can you replace the mince pie with, I don't know, a banana? Like even a banana may be slightly better. I don't know. So it's a case-by-case basis, and the coaching process is very important because that person has to lead. I mentioned earlier, we're not kidnapping people and making them eat steaks, right? So if you're not kidnapping people and making them eat steaks, then how are you actually encouraging behavior change? You're giving them the knowledge. So first of all, you get rid of the brainwashing. Vegetable-based is not food. That's not proper human food, number one. But that's what you're eating. So, we're not here to wrestle with you. Given what I'm now telling you, that animal-based foods are going to be more healthy, what do you want to eat tomorrow? What do you want to eat the next day? Can I help you meal plan? Can I help you with recipes, right? So I think providing that kind of support is super important. And I think it's the only way we get sustainable change, because the people who I see who don't stick are people who are like, yeah, I tried it for a week and I got diarrhea and that was the end of it. Like that's never a sustainable for some people, and you may be one of them, Dave. For some people, quitting cold turkey is great, and you have to do it, and maybe you want to do it, you give it a try. But if you try to quit cold turkey and you understand and it didn't work for you for whatever reason, you should understand that there are different ways to do it. And just because you had a slice of pizza today doesn't mean you can't eat better tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. I think we have that kind of attitude of finality about us as well. Like we slip up and we have that slice of pizza, and it's like, oh well, we're done now. No, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I learned this a long time ago when I tried to quit smoking for the first time, and I don't know. I think you also used to be a smoker, Dave. So yeah, so I don't know how many times you tried to quit smoking. I mean, it was more than one for me, right? So
Yeah, many times.
yeah, yeah. So the thing is, how did I learn to actually sustainably quit smoking? It was to be a little bit graceful with myself. It was a bit. It was to say, okay, you had a rough day. You bought a pack. You smoked a couple of them. Can you put the pack away? Can you hide the pack from yourself? Can you give the pack away? Like, what is going to work for you? Or maybe you take. You're not going to be able to. You might need a cigarette tomorrow too. So maybe you take one out and you hide the rest of the pack from yourself. Like, there are individualized answers to this. And I bring up the cigarettes or the alcohol very deliberately because I do think plant foods are an addiction. And therefore, I do think we have to be kind of, as I say, we have to have some grace with ourselves. We have to have some gentleness with ourselves. Sort of say, look, okay, you had the pizza. It's a powerful stimulant, man. You look at what sugar does in the brain. It looks like cocaine or heroin or any of these things, right? Don't underestimate the power of that pizza slice, right? But it's going to cause you problems in the long term. It is a drug. It's not really food. It's not really proper food. So given that you know that, what do you want to do tomorrow? Do you want to have half a slice of pizza? Do you want to have no pizza? Do you want to have something that will replace the pizza? Do you want to have, I don't know, some carnivore custard with stevia that will alleviate your cravings? Like, the answers have to be individualized to the person's needs. But we do need to give them space to be able to go through that process. And not everyone's ending point is the same. I mean, I mentioned that sometimes we start with the lower carb approach. I mentioned that my wife is sort of doing a lower carb approach rather than keto or anything like that. If the lower carb approach works for people and they get symptom relief, hey, no problem. I'm not forcing anyone to eat the way that I eat. But what I find is, because most people have been sick a long time, probably not enough. And so therefore, if you don't get the relief with the carb restriction, then what's the next step for you? Are you going to go higher in protein? Are you going to go even lower in carbs? Are you going to go higher in fat? Again, no one size fits all here. But I'm just telling you based on experience, you probably, for mental health, for physical health, for reversing autoimmune, probably just keeping that white rice on the plate or bread on the plate or whatever it may be, probably it's not going to be enough. You have to take that off the plate and then figure out where you want to go from there.
Just the way you ask questions and like the examples that you've given there, just the way you're asking questions and you're coaching people through, what are you going to do tomorrow then? It really does show how much value there is in coaching especially for people who are kind of unsure of where they're going with their diet and they're kind of they do need that extra help, especially for someone coming into carnivore who's like, as you said before, they're having breakfast and it's like 2 fried eggs. And it's like getting them used to, okay, this is not about calorie restriction anymore. This is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most frustrating clients are the ones who I call like professional dieters, because they've been about calorie restriction for so long, and they're all about like MyFitnessPal and this app and that app, and it's very difficult to sort of say, listen, if you want to track, I'm not going to stop you from tracking, but maybe we could track carbs. Maybe that's a more useful thing to track rather than tracking calories, because tracking calories is really, really not useful. I've never seen it be useful. So it's like, but they're so addicted to it. They're addicted to the process. They're addicted to weighing themselves every morning and freaking out if there's like, if you put on half a kilo or a quarter of a kilo, suddenly, you're texting your coach and whatever. It's like, I mean, I understand. Again, I'm trying to have grace with these people too. It's not their fault. They've sort of become addicted to diet culture. But I want people to, one of the fundamental things I want my students, my coachees to sort of learn is that they have to have an intimate relationship with reality. And so if you love losing weight, that could be a problem. Like, that's not necessarily a healthy place to be, because obviously if you love losing weight, then there's going to be at some future point, you're going to have to gain that weight again in order to lose it, right? So it's like, I don't want you, it's not that I don't want you addicted. If you are addicted to something, I want you to know that you're addicted, right? I had for the longest time an addiction to vegan chocolate. I fully admit it, right? I don't know if you remember the 90s brands. In Canada, we had something called Tropical Source, disastrous tofu-based chocolate. Do not recommend it. I mean,
Sounds lovely.
It was really, really weird. But I was just in love with it. They had a green tea flavor that I was having, as much as I could afford it, which was not often because it was super expensive. But I had to sort of understand. So that that addiction led me to other addictions, and I still have a sweet tooth. So I still have to understand that when I'm having whatever it is, the stevia sweetened carnivore custard or whatever it may be, now I know, okay, it's an addiction that I'm still grappling with even after all this time. Um, it is what it is. I have done periods where I've broken that addiction completely, and frankly, I don't really like myself. When I get angry, I don't like myself when I'm quitting smoking either. Right? I'm hangry. I'm hangry is the wrong word. I'm angry. I'm sort of confrontational. I'm just not in a good mood. But this is how anyone breaks an addiction, right? So you just have to be. I would like people to be aware of their addictions and maybe to choose their addictions. And maybe even to cultivate addictions. I've become addicted to a really good picanha steak. like, I don't actually know if that counts as an addiction, but it's something that I enjoy. And if I don't get it as often as I was like, I kind of get a little bit antsy, right? So maybe you need to cultivate these addictions, and there are other addictions that are more harmful than steak. Steak is not harmful at all, I don't think. But for example, coffee. It's like, if I can get someone to trade a carb addiction for a coffee addiction, I mean, that's a win as far as I'm concerned. It's a big win. Even if they're consuming more coffee than I would like, still a win.
Yeah, definitely. So if you've got a new, relatively new person in your coaching group, and you want to convince them that going carnivore, or at least going low carb, is what they should be doing, what kind of, you want to call them, selling points would you be emphasizing about this way of eating?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Dave. So we never actually start with that, right? So what we'll start always with is the symptoms. So the way nobody, including you or me at the beginning of this, nobody was like sitting around going, geez, I wish I could eat only meat. Like none of us were, let's be honest. Yeah. That's not how we start these things. What we start is, oh damn, I know I'm suffering from depression. I don't want to get back on Prozac, right? Or I know my autoimmune's out of control. I don't want to take the damn steroidal anti-inflammatories because they have side effects, and I know that they raise or my pre-diabetes is turning into diabetes. What am I going to do here, right? So the starting point is always about health, right? So then I say, okay, so let's take any one of those. Let's take autoimmune as a good starting point, right? Or autoimmune and or mental health. Those two as a good case study, right? So someone's coming to me with an autoimmune issue. Say it's an autoimmune gut issue. Say it's UC, ulcerative colitis, for example, right? What I say is, cool. Are you aware? So, okay, what I understand is that you're having these symptoms. You've had a flare up. You haven't been. Someone came to me a little while ago and said they hadn't had a normal bowel movement since 2017. Okay, pretty serious case. So, look, I understand you're not having normal bowel movements. You would like to normalize here. What have you tried? Oh, I've tried veganism. I've tried this. I've tried that. Have you tried? In the first case, I would say, are you open to trying, first of all, fasting maybe as an intervention? I say, no, not really. This person was underweight, so no, fasting's not going to work. In that case, what I would like you to try is a slightly more animal-based way of eating, getting rid of some of the high fiber foods that you're consuming, especially things like oatmeal, which is fiber, and it's going to raise your blood sugar as well. So there's going to be an inflammatory response. And by the way, some of these greens that you're eating, your spinach, your kale, your broccoli, and so on, these have anti-nutrients which are known to cause problems with digestive autoimmune, right? And by the way, here's a number of case studies of people who've been able to reverse their ulcerative colitis, including some case studies possibly on your channel, Dave, with a purely carnivorous approach, right? So given all of that, what do you want to do? I've given you the information. Now you tell me, what do you want to do? Oh, maybe I'll try. It depends how desperate they are at that particular point in time. The client that I'm talking about was like, yeah, I'm on board. I'm going to do it because I have no choice, because I haven't had a normal bowel movement in years. And if this can help, and with warnings, with caveats, say, look, if you go in all at once, probably symptoms are going to get worse before they get better, right? Which is something we see very often. But they do get better, and you can't evaluate until you've given it at least 6 to 12 weeks. You can't evaluate what's going on. And if you want to keep some low carb plant foods in, maybe we could, but I'm warning you that, I mean, if those low carb plant foods aren't suiting you, then my next recommendation will be to take those out, right? So it really depends on what the individual wants to do. And again, if the individual is just like, I want to lose 5 kilos, then we might not go to carnivore straight away. But what we will definitely do is emphasize animal-based protein, because on all the studies, even when it comes to basic things like weight loss, the way you lose weight is you increase animal-based protein and you reduce carbohydrates. There's nothing magical in that formula, and every single study has shown that.
And yeah, and then you actually keep the 5 kilos off too. Then it's not, you're not bouncing up and down like you would be if you're just doing some kind of calorie restriction thing.
Ideally, I mean, I don't want to lie. I mean, I've had clients who've lost the weight and put it back on, right? But why? My analysis of why that's behavior change is hard, and trying to the clients who tend to lose the weight and put it back on are clients who actually had very little knowledge about anything to do with diet before they came to me. And so I'm able to sort of teach them, and sometimes I think they probably leave too quickly. So there's some studies on how long it takes to develop a habit. Some people say 3 months, some people say 6 months, some people say a year. My answer is, I don't know, but it's probably longer than you think. So, like whatever, when you think you've got the hang of it, like you got to actually work. You don't have to work with me. You can work with someone else, or you can work it on your own, but you have to actually consciously focus on it for another, say, 6 months after you think you've actually got the hang of it. Because what happens is you have a rough day at work. I mean, it's the same thing with the cigarette thing. Like you have your boss calls you names, you have an argument with your spouse, whatever it may be. I mean, the dog poops on the carpet. Like, I don't know what the specific stress is, but you go out and you reach for a cigarette, or you go out and you reach for a Krispy Kreme because that's what you used to do when you were stressed, right? So there's, the people who, the more time you give yourself to develop new healthy habits. By new healthy habits, what do I mean? I mean, when the dog poops on your carpet, what are you going to do now? Like, a dog's going to poop on your carpet. He's done it before. He's going to do it again. What are you going to do? After you cleaned it up, what are you going to do to de-stress? How are you going to reward yourself for doing whatever you had to do to clean up the mess, right? So thinking these things through. And we know a lot about the human brain. We know a lot about psychology. We know a lot about habits. We know a lot about the cues, the trigger habits. We know a lot about the rewards that people need to sort of give themselves in order to get that habit working and so on, right? So, and it's not going to be just once. Like, the dog is going to poop on your carpet again and again and again and again. And so every single time, like, you have to actually, maybe I'm not giving you a good example, but whatever it is, that stressor, you're going to get in an argument with your spouse. Your boss is going to be angry at you again and again and again and again. And every single time you're going to be tempted to reach for the donut. And every single time you're going to have to find an answer that is better and more sustainable than reaching for the donut. And what are you going to do, right? So this is where, I don't know if you follow Dr. Saives, another South African, but based in Florida. He talks about, emotion management and sort of exercise snacks and stuff like this. Like that's where that kind of language becomes really helpful, because there are things we can do. We don't have to be, we don't have to just deprive ourselves. Life is not about deprivation. There are things you can give yourself. There are rewards you can give yourself, but it takes time to cultivate these habits. And the easiest thing is always going to be reach for the Starbucks, reach for the Krispy Kreme, reach for whatever that is.
How can people reach out to you? How can they find your YouTube channel and that kind of thing?
So on YouTube, I'm at Meat Heals, so MEATHVALS, and I also have a website, samirdasani.net. I also have a podcast, Recovery and Transformation. I'd love to have a conversation with you, Dave, on that podcast, but also anyone else who would like to share their story. Whether you have a success story or whether you're a work in progress, we'd love to hear from you. I wrote an essay. I never published this essay, but it was like, society breeds addicts was the point of that essay. Maybe I should publish it. But it's like, we're living in such high stress environments in which humans are not meant to live. So my PhD, which I'm about to finish, is in anthropology. So looking at what humans traditionally, how we would have lived and how humans should live, ideally, in order to thrive. The societies that we're in, basically, work your butt off in order to live a life that's just barely above the poverty line. I mean, I'm sort of oversimplifying, but that's, for a lot of us, that's what it looks like. That's so far removed from how humans were supposed to live that it's no surprise that we turn to junk foods, plant foods, sugar, nicotine, alcohol, cocaine. Like it's actually perfectly natural. If you strain any kind of animal system, and this is the work that's been done on addiction about 20 years ago. If you, there was a lovely experiment actually, where you gave, there was a mouse who was, usually the way that the experiment was done was you give the mouse regular water and you give the mouse heroin water, and you put them in a box, and naturally all the mice get addicted to heroin very, very quickly. But this researcher about 20 years ago said, look, that's a bad experiment, because if you put me in a room with nothing but heroin to keep me company, like I'd be an addict too. There's no question about it. So they gave the mice a luxury condo, like the fantastic, they gave the mouse companionship, they gave the mouse everything it could possibly want, an exercise wheel and so on. Interestingly, they found that the mouse still took some of the heroin water, but they didn't get addicted, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if we can actually make ourselves live more like the luxury mouse, with all of our, given that there are constraints and different people have different capacities and different financial capacities and so on, but if we can think more about, we have this life of luxury, whatever that, however we define that, we are less likely to turn to the addictive substances. So trying to build in that abundance mindset, I think that's really what's going to, and abundant food as well. I mean, I think meat, for the vast majority of human existence, what was the sign that you were part of an affluent community? You were eating meat. If you were poor, you were not eating as much meat. This is, we know even from recent history. So that meat is a sign of abundance, relaxation is a sign of abundance, even things like meditation and sunlight and so on. If we can give the body these cues, I think we're going to be doing a whole lot better health-wise and a whole lot better able to avoid these addictive substances.
That strikes me as something where maybe regular kind of practicing of gratitude, thinking what you're happy for, that kind of thing would be useful for that.
Yeah, that's certainly what the data shows. The data shows that, and it's a fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like even if you're, I know health coaches who will say, when they wake up in the morning, they thank the pillow, they thank the wall, they thank for me, this all feels a bit strange. And I don't necessarily do that myself, but I can see the value of it. Appreciation for what you have, gratitude for what you have, is definitely a very, very good way to cultivate that sense of abundance and happiness.
Samir, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. And it's been really, really interesting talking about the coaching side of things as well. I'll link to your channel and website and so forth in the and podcast in the description, and people will be able to find you through those links. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. And I look forward to having this chat on my channel.